Okay, this is going to be the start of the metal fab for our Phono stage preamp project. And so went over in the other video, we're going to be using this board here, and I've got all the components stripped off of it so that we can easily lay this down flat. And then this board goes down here like this. And the difference between this build and my last one is I want to have 3 inches between these two boards so that I can put some bulkheads between them to help isolate the preamp from the power supply. So one of the first things you want to do is get some pieces of wood and stack them up like this so you've got something to support the aluminum here so we don't bend it while we're working on it. And then from studying this, I know I want to keep these edges and this equidistant from the side. And so we can use this caliper and make sure that doesn't have to be exact, but just pretty close, evenly spaced around the sides. And then we get our automatic center punch here, and we go right in the center of that hole and make our first mark. Now we're going to go over here to the other side. And make our first mark. And then you can look down you can sight through these holes and make sure those look like they're pretty much centered. And then you might be tempted to go drill all the holes at once or mark them all at once. I think that's a bad idea. I think you should be doing just 2 of them to start with, and then use them to locate the board, and then mark the rest of your holes, and then drill a couple more, and then drill the final 2, and that way you're more likely to end up with all the holes lined up in the right place. So then we're using these little 440 screws, and they're right at 100 thousandths, measuring with our little caliper here. So then we go into our drill bit case, and we look for a drill that's just a little bigger. I think we want to go up 1 size from that, which would be a 1/8 inch drill bit. And that's 125 thousandths. And that gives us a little bit of slop around the screw, so it doesn't have to be a perfectly drilled hole, but there's plenty there for the head to catch onto. And then we get a small pilot bit. And you never want to drill to the final hole size. You always want to drill with a smaller bit first to make what I call pilot hole, and then you come back and drill the final size. We get our drill with our pilot bit, and we drill. We get it in the little divot we made. Go real slow at first to make sure it doesn't walk. And then once we see it starting to go, we drill that through. We do the same thing over here. Slow at first to make sure it's not walking. And then drill through. Okay. Now we go with the final size drill bit. And it's better if you don't smash the chuck into the metal like I did on that first hole. Like that. And our screw fits through there nice. And so I want to make sure that I've got this on up. This is the upside, because it has the name of the board on here. You don't want to build it this way. You want to make sure you build it this way, or all your tube sockets will end up being wired backwards. I've seen people do that with these boards, and that's not a good thing. So now we have those two holes started. Now we come back here. We just try to make sure this is pretty equidistant from side to side. Again, this doesn't have to be just absolutely perfect, but the straighter you can get this now, the easier it'll be when you're doing the tube sockets, because then they'll all line up. So then you hold that in place. You get this try to get that as centered as you can, and mark that hole. And mark that hole. And then we do the same thing over. We get our little small drill. Make sure it's centered on the punch. Go slow to start with, and then drill through. You give just enough pressure where the bit's cutting and you see chips coming off, but not so much that it breaks the bends and you see the drill bit bending and it'll break the drill bit. Okay. Then we put the finish hole size in. Like I said, it's tempting to just drill them all at once and mark them all at once, but I found you make less mistakes doing it this way, and we're not in a big hurry. So now we can use 4 screws to hold this down. Make sure that we got all 4 of these right, because if you mess up here early on, you can kind of get one of those little round needle files and move a hole over just a little bit if you have to at this point, and then it's not the end of the world. We kind of wiggle this around a little bit. Yep, that all feels good. And you can tell the holes that are the mounting holes because they got a little hex shape of copper around them. So then we have these 2 holes. And then we'll have all the holes drilled that are mounting this board to the standoffs to mount this board to the chassis. So back to our small drill. The key thing to do in this metal work is just take your time. Don't get in a hurry. Like, make sure that's really centered on the hole. And go slow. You see we hit the wood there, which is good. And depending on how you want to finish your preamp, if you're going to leave it bare aluminum, you have to be a little extra careful not to scratch it and leave this covering stuff on here, protectant. But if you're going to paint it, it's not as big of an issue, because you can sand any little scratches out before you paint it. Now we can have it sitting down with our screws and look through. And these other two holes are spot on the money too. So we are good to go on the holes that we're drilling for mounting this to the chassis. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is probably kind of the scariest part of this, and that's drilling the holes for the tubes to stick through the top of the chassis. And we're going to have to do like transfer measurements from the centers of these tubes to the edge of the chassis. So we want to come in like this, and you are going to have to kind of eyeball where the center of the tube is. I mean, here's your, here's the marks for the tube sockets. And the center is going to be right in the middle of there. I mean, it might be a good idea to get a little screwdriver and mark the centers of these tube sockets. Like right there, we're eyeballing it. But we can come back and then measure from like here to there. And these don't have to be just perfect. That's real close. That one's actually off just a little bit. Let's move this one up towards the front just a little bit. We're making just real light scratches. The same with this one. Let's move this one forward just a little bit. We want to make sure that looks pretty even from front to back. So then we're going to go like this. Let me come in from this side. And let's put a couple screws in here so we know this is where the board's going to be sitting. And then we're going to measure just off this edge. Now this is rounded, so you have to kind of go past the round part and measure to the center of the tube socket. And then come back, and we're going to kind of eyeball this first one, the first mark. Just try to get it in the center. It's going to be somewhere around there. Let's just double check our measurement didn't move. Was that measure twice and cut once? Like that. Like that. Okay. Now we want to measure in from the side. Same thing we just did. And about like that. That looks real. That should be good. And measure like that. And so we know the center for that tube socket is right there. And now we just do the same thing with these other two tubes. Like I said, this is kind of the only part that's kind of critical, because you want the tubes to sit in the center of that hole when they're sticking through, and you don't want it like way off to one side. The other thing we probably should have done is just make sure that we've got a mark here in this direction that approximates the center. Let's go ahead and check this one too. Yep, we had that one right on the money in that direction. And let's make a mark in this one. It's just off to with that. So we're going to find our screws. Eh. Just make sure these screw holes are aligned. And we can put a screwdriver or anything in there to kind of make sure all this is staying in alignment. I've got some extra I got some screws on order. I was actually short on these 440 screws that we're using for this project. And the tubes aren't. It looks like the tube socket is. It's shifted that way off axis, off the center just a little bit. So all three of these are the same distance that way. So let's go ahead and actually miss that one just a little bit. And it's fine because we're at the point now where we haven't drilled any holes. We can move that center punch over just a little bit. Sometimes it helps to do it twice if you're doing something like we were just doing where we know the board's about like that, and that tube's going to be about right there, and then you got to get a mark somewhere in the general area before you do the distance from the front edge mark. So you have something to make the cross with. Then we come down again for just past the rolled off front edge to that mark, and we make the sideways mark, and we know it's right. We'll double punch those just to get a nice firm punch mark. And then we'll come down and measure this last tube. Again, just past this rolled off front so we can get an accurate measurement. It's right there. And it's right there. Okay, so we missed this one just a little bit. We want to make sure these are all in line. So that equals that. That. See, that one's over just a little bit from where this one is. It never hurts to measure things a couple of times. And especially on these tube socket holes, we're going to be punching out a big hole. So if you have multiple little dimples there, it's not going to hurt anything. So we want to move that one over just a breath right there. And then that one's right there. Now we can come back and measure the center of these dimples. All three of them are right in a row. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to double check the measurement front to back. Because if we mess this up, this basically ruins this chassis. And we don't want to have to go buy another one just because we got in a hurry. So that's that distance. Perfect. Because having these tubes centered in these little holes when they come up through the top is what, to me, really makes this preamp look cool. just missed that one. Let's go that direction. One, about half a hole width. Perfect. And then the last one, we've triple checked the side to side. Well, now we're just getting the front to back measurements. Perfect. And there's that one right there. And that's that one right there. Okay, so because we're going to be drilling such a big hole here, we can use this bit that we used for the finish holes here as the pilot for these. So make sure you know which one of these little punch marks we're headed toward. And you're going to think, she's crazy. She's like over measuring this stuff so many times. Once we've made these little starter drill holes, we're going to check this one last time before we drill all the way through, because at this point we can still correct it. Once you get a hole drilled off center, it's pretty much done. That one's right on the money. And luckily, most of these other holes aren't this critical as far as getting the measurements. I mean, if the power input socket's up and down, you know, a 1/16 of an inch, it doesn't make any difference. But these really do have to be, that one's dead on the money. But these, in relation to where the board's sitting, really do have to be pretty close, or it's going to look goofy and the tubes are going to be not centered in the holes they stick through. Okay, that one's perfect. And then let's do our side to side. That one. I think we missed that one. No, let's see, that's the center. Yep. So now what we have to do is go to the left of this little hole a bit and center punch that over there. And then we get our drill again. We get it on that center punch over on that side, and we angle the drill a little bit this direction. And now we've moved the center of that hole over a little bit. Beautiful. And again, if they're off a few thousandths, it's not a big deal. But this is the time to correct it, not after you've got this hole drilled. And then you got all three of these holes really close to the right center. Okay, now we're going to get ready to drill a hole through for our chassis punch. And so we got to drill a hole that big. It's a pretty freaking big hole. And we might want to do this in 2 steps. You want that hole, I think that's the final size, and you can see that's way bigger than that. So let's go with a bit that's about halfway in between those two. We'll go with a 17/64, but anything somewhere between these two would be fine. It's just better not to jump from one hole size to another in huge steps. There's that one. There's that one. that one. And we get our, and that's where these step bits are great, because most of these drills have a 3/8 chuck, and you wouldn't be able to put this size drill bit in it. And let's just measure this bolt real quick and make sure we're not getting too big here. Yep, that should be perfect. You don't want to push down too hard with these big bits when you're drilling through a pilot hole. You want it to chip away and not like go spiraling through and then get stuck in the metal. So don't put a lot of down pressure on with these bigger bits, and run them at a medium speed as you're drilling a hole like this. See, it can get stuck kind of like that. Here we go. There we go. So, because this has got this protective cover on here, or protective coating, we don't have to worry about marring up the top surface of this. If we were using a powder coated chassis, or it didn't have this plastic on here, you'd want to put like a sheet of paper between this die and the metal to keep from marring it up, but this plastic will protect it. So we put that through like that, and then I already put a little grease on this off camera, so this would be ready to go. And then we get our adjustable wrench. Let me find it. Oh, come on. Okay, here's an adjustable wrench. And when you're turning these through on this thin aluminum, make sure you're keeping this, like, don't try to do this kind of action or where it's twisting on this die, because it'll distort the top of this aluminum. The steel's a little easier to deal with as far as bending, but it's also harder to punch the hole through. But you just keep turning this, and you'll hear it go pop, and then pop. And look at that. Beautiful hole. Then you have to take this apart, and there'll be a piece of metal in here that you need to get something and fish that piece of metal we just punched out. And then you're ready to do the next hole. So let's do these other two. And get these other two holes punched. And again, before you start punching the holes, you want to put a little, I use like car wheel bearing grease, but any kind of grease you can put on the bolt. It goes pop, pop. And we got 3 perfect holes in the top of the chassis. So I think we're going to stop right here on this video. Try to keep these in short segments. And the next time we'll work on doing the holes for the RCA sock jacks on the front, and the other RCA jacks that are going to go up here on the top. And then we'll figure out mounting the transformers and the power supply board on the back. So stay tuned. Please subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this. Like the video, and we'll see you soon for the next phase of our preamp build. Have a great day.